Good evening, good evening, everybody. My name's Mick, and I am an alcoholic. And
Mick,
welcome to the Canarian International Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Please join us for a few moments silence to remember why there's still suffering alcoholic inside and outside this meeting. And I've asked Bob if he'd do the preamble.
in the Grapevine in 1947. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. AA has no dues or fees. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety.
Thank you, Bob. Right. A very warm welcome goes out to any newcomers or anyone returning to Alcoholics Anonymous. The chat is now disabled until the end of the meeting, except for the meeting hosts. If you feel the security of this meeting is at risk at any time during the meeting, please private message one of the co-hosts so that they can check it out. Right, and we've got Mike H, who's sharing tonight. Mike, you've got 45 to 50 minutes if you want them to share. So I'd like to hand over to you, Mike, to do the business.
Thank you, Mick. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. My computer's a little bit wonky sometimes with volume, and my voice is kind of soft, so bear with me. If you have trouble hearing me, do like this, like us old folks do, and I'll try to speak louder. So my name is Mike. I am an alcoholic. I had a lot of trouble admitting that at first. I now recognize that that is what I am, and I'm going to tell you how long it took and why it took so long. Mossy asked me to share with you guys a couple months ago, and I'm going to talk about my experience, strength, and hope, how it deals with alcoholism. If I seem to be getting off track a little bit, I'm going to try to make sure that it pertains to why I became an alcoholic, how it was, what happened with me, and what it's like now. So I just got back from a week of helping my wife watch our 4-year-old granddaughter, and I'm pooped. Good Lord. It's hard for a 72-year-old to hang with a 4-year-old, I'm telling you, but I give all credit to this program for helping me be able to do that. Before this program, I wouldn't have had anything to do with my granddaughter. I would have not had anything to do with my family. It was all about me. Everything was always all about me. Selfishness, self-centeredness. Now, I'm going to start from the beginning. I grew up in an Army family. My dad was a career Army officer. He graduated from West Point, which I guess the equivalent in the UK is Sandhurst. I was the oldest son of 5 children, and I was groomed to go to West Point, and maybe I'll talk about that more later. But my dad was focused on his career. He was not focused on the family. My mom grew up as an only child, and she was thrust into the role of caregiver for 5 children while we moved every 6 months to 2.5 years. And I was just looking at my dad's a list of where he had been assigned over his career, and by the time I was 15, I had moved 11 times. Never was in one place, and Jim, you can probably appreciate this. Never was in one place very long. I was shy growing up. I had trouble making friends. My parents were um, good people, but they were not present emotionally, meaning I couldn't go to them with my problems. They didn't know how to help me. And so I learned to be self-reliant. I learned to spend all my time alone. By the time I would make a friend, it would be time to move. So I was always the new kid on the block. I don't remember getting bullied too much in new school, but I think I had such a scowl on my face all the time that the kids just kind of left me alone. That's all I can figure. I think I got into one fight when I was a kid, and and that's about it. But I was a miserable kid. I was mad. I was fearful. I was self-centered. I couldn't relate to my parents. I couldn't relate to my siblings. Um, and I think a lot of what happened to me alcohol-wise had to do with that upbringing. Um, Now, I know it sounds like, well, man, at least you had a home. At least you weren't homeless. And that's true. I wasn't homeless. My parents provided shelter. You know, I had all the basics. And after I came to an Alcoholic Anonymous, I was able to look back at that and forgive them and know that they did the very best they could with what they had. And just like we all do, you know, but at the time I couldn't recognize that I was just a kid. All I could figure out was, I don't know what to do. You know, I don't know how to relate to kids at school. I don't know how to relate to my parents' friends. Um, and so I'm going to fast forward now to when I was a sophomore in high school, probably 15 years old. By that time, my dad had gotten promoted to lieutenant colonel or colonel. He was starting to get up there in rank. He eventually retired as a three-star Army general. Um, so I'm going to go back to when I was 15. Now, they used to have cocktail parties at our house. And I was the oldest son. I had an older sister. We were in charge of cleanup. Okay. So you walk around the room and hear all these half empty glasses of, you know, cocktails or half empty beers. And I know that that is when I first um, experienced the effects of alcohol because I not only would clean those up, but I would drink from them. Okay. Now, when I was a sophomore in high school, we were stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and the houses on for the officer housing on Fort Bragg were old, almost antebellum, almost like Civil War houses, and they had a little room right next to the kitchen called the maid's room. Now, this was a tiny bedroom that the housekeeper would live in back in the day, back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but it was right by the kitchen, and right by the kitchen was a back door. And so that was my room, and I found that it was very easy for me to sneak out at night after everybody had gone to bed and meet up with acquaintance. I don't know, I could really call them friends at this point, were acquaintances who had gotten hold of some alcohol, typically beer, and we would drink it, and I could sneak back in. Um, so let me see. Sophomore in high school. I graduated high school second in my class. I eventually got to stay in the same school, but it was, and I'm not going to go into details how I did it because normally I would be. I did end up going to five different high schools, but the one I finally graduated from was one that I had met some people, finally got some friends, actually got a girlfriend, and uh, but I learned how to drink secretly. I was introduced to marijuana by my girlfriend. Don't know if that was a good thing or not, but it took me out of myself. And the point of me drinking at that point was to take me out of that anger and fear and resentment that I was filled with. And when I drank, I felt like a different person. I felt like I belonged. I felt like I could interact with my acquaintances, my fellow students. You know, I was a different person and I loved it. Um, and at that point, I wasn't drinking so much that I just, you know, got wasted and passed out. That came later. By the, but when I graduated from high school, if I wasn't drinking, I was thinking about it. Okay. Because I liked that sensation that I got from alcohol. So, oldest son, oldest son was groomed to go to West Point to follow in the footsteps of his father. I definitely did not want to go, but I was too much of a coward to tell the general at this point that I didn't want to go to West Point. So I went. I lasted about a year and a half, did very well there, but I couldn't drink um, uh, while there, and I was chafing at it, and I was very miserable. I got depressed. I got suicidal. And for the first time in my life, I made a decision on my own, and it was to leave West Point. So I stayed about a year and a half, then I got the hell out of there. And as a result of that, I was pretty much written off by my parents. Now, they were available if I were to call them for money or anything, but I tried not to do that. Now, when I left West Point, I had a little money because when you're at West Point, you get paid half the salary of a second lieutenant, and they put it in a little bank account for you, and you get it when you graduate. Well, I didn't graduate, but I still got, I think it was about $2,000. So then this is 1973. That was a lot of money. So I went back to where my high school was. I back to where my, a couple of friends I had were. I was on my own. I lived with some friends for a while, and I let my hair grow long. I let my beard grow long. I just went off the deep end basically, and I lived to party. I went from one extreme to the other. Partying was my goal then, to drink as much as I could, and during my drinking and drugging days, because I used drugs too, I tried everything that was available. The only thing I didn't try was heroin. Now, I was in the room once with a guy who shot up, and he asked me if I wanted to, and that's where I drew the line. But I didn't draw the line anywhere else. I tried everything else that was available. But alcohol, specifically beer, was my drug of choice. So I'm kind of floundering at this point after I left West Point. I eventually ended up in Athens, Georgia, where after working for a year, I started school at the University of Georgia. This was in 1976. And the reason I ended up in Georgia is because my dad had gotten stationed in Germany, and I went over there for a summer earlier and tried to smuggle some hashish back from Germany to the United States. And of course, it was discovered. I wasn't there when it was discovered. My friend said, "You better not come back because they're waiting for you." Um, I got a call. I was due to go back to the States, and I was in the Frankfurt, Germany airport, and I got paged in the Frankfurt, Germany airport, and it was my dad, who was, I think by then, a two-star Army general. He said, "You can come back because they're waiting for you to arrest you on drug charges. You can come back home and stay with me, us and the family, or you can go back and face some music." Those were my choices. Well, I was a coward. So I went back home. I lasted there about a week because it was pretty cold. Not the temperature, but the temperature in the house. And so here's the oldest son who's facing drug charges. They weren't too nice to me. Anyway, I ended up flying back to a different airport than I was originally. Of course, thinking I was going to get arrested at the airport. Of course, I wasn't. So I went back and got a lawyer. Lawyer said, "You need to leave the country." And I said, "Well, I just got back in the country." Well, say, "You need to leave the state." So I left North Carolina, which is where I was, and went to Georgia. And that's how I ended up in Athens, Georgia. I eventually went to school there. I met my future wife there, graduated in 1979, and then I decided to go to dental school, which I started in 1980. By then I was married, and I was still uh, drinking heavily, but I was a binge drinker. I didn't drink every day. I only drank when I felt like I could afford to drink all I could drink and pass out or get sick. And so I wasn't an alcoholic. I never even knew what an alcoholic was. To me, an alcoholic was someone who had lost everything, lived under the bridge, had to drink every day, the classic low bottom alcoholic. That was my image of an alcoholic. I didn't drink every day. I could go days without drinking. I thought about it every day, but as long as I was in school or I was working, I could go without drinking, and when the weekend came, all hell broke loose. That's when that's when I started drinking. And so it turns out that my wife was the daughter of an alcoholic. She started seeing these signs in me that maybe I was an alcoholic, but I wouldn't listen to her, of course. I was in complete denial. And so our marriage from the beginning, very beginning, was pretty rocky. And I think I'm going to fast forward now to 1990. So I drank, and that is when I stopped drinking. And I'm going to tell you how it happened. I drank from the time I was 15 until the time I was maybe 37. So 22 years. My drinking gradually got a little worse over time, but I could still go days and days without drinking. But when I did drink, um, uh, I couldn't stop. And so when I finally realized, and I'm going to shoot way fast forward, but when I finally realized I was an alcoholic, it was after reading this passage in the big book. And there was a couple of them, page 21. Um, what about the real alcoholic? He may start as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his career, drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Now, that was me. Once I started drinking, I couldn't stop. And on page 44, um, when I was in such denial about whether or not I was an alcoholic, um, I read this part in on We Agnostics, and it said, "If when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic." Those two places in the big book were instrumental in helping to convince me now I was an alcoholic. Excuse me. So I'm going to go back to 1990. I'm in the Air Force. I'm a dentist in the Air Force. I've been in the Air Force now for 6 years. I've done a tour in Germany where I was drinking the great German beers. We lived in the Mosel Rhine, the Mosel Wine Valley, so they had the great German wines. I had beer delivered to my door. You know, the Germans would bring you cases of beer right to your door. Um, but I was only binging. I rarely would I would have a drink, at night. I was too afraid if I started, I wouldn't stop. So I waited till the weekends, um, so I could function. I mean, I had patients during the week. I had to be able to function. So I get torn up on Friday. I would be recovered by Monday, but it would take me the whole weekend. I don't think I ever blacked out, but I know I passed out and I got sick probably every time I drank. Um, so 1990, we come back from Florida. I've gotten an assignment to Korea for a year so that my following assignment could be in the Florida Panhandle where my wife's parents lived. He was dying of cancer. He was recovering from alcoholism, um, a lot because his daughter, my wife, basically gave him an ultimatum, and she did the same thing to me. She said, "You're an alcoholic. I see you. I see my father in you. I see how you drink. I know you've been an alcoholic. We've been married for 12 years. I can't take it anymore. You either stop drinking and go to Alcoholics Anonymous, or we're done." I had two young kids at the time, a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. I had a good job. I had a career. I had everything. Um, and so I decided to stop drinking. Right then and there, decided to stop drinking. She gave me the ultimatum after I had gotten back from a weekend binge with a friend of mine. We had driven in his cousin's RV to, I think, Louisiana. I don't remember anything about that trip. I know I drank the whole weekend, but I don't remember anything about it. All I remember is when I got home, she gave me the ultimatum. So I stopped drinking, but my first AA meeting I went to was in the Panhandle of Florida, and I was in complete denial. I didn't believe a word I said. The slogans on the wall: easy does it, first things first, think, 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 one day at a time, just went in one eye and out the other, or went in one ear and out the other. Didn't mean anything to me. I wasn't an alcoholic. I just drank heavily on the weekends. Okay. And so, and you may not believe this, for the next maybe 15 years, I stayed on that dry drunk, in and out of AA meetings, never accepting the fact that I was an alcoholic, um, never doing the first step, didn't think my life was unmanageable, everybody else's fault, okay, completely self-absorbed. Um, yeah, I, uh, I just, when I think back on those days, I can't believe that I went that long without drinking. I thought about it all the time, but I was so stubborn. Um, I just didn't. But I was filled with anger. I was still fearful. I was resentful. I have all those character defects that this program has since taught me to work on. Um, but I couldn't admit I was an alcoholic. So I, by this time, I was, when I finally came to, the way I like to say that I finally came to and accepted the fact that I was an alcoholic. And during our marriage was kind of rocky. We stayed together, but sometimes I would get so mad that I would leave. I would just leave. I'd walk out the door and say, we're done. And I'd go to a cheap motel, stay a few days, come to my senses, come back, ask for forgiveness, tell my wife I would get help, and it would go on like that for a long time. So the last time that I walked out the door, I ended up in this place that was kind of, and this is right. This is now we're in a town called Medford, Oregon. I'm out of the Air Force. I'm in a private practice. I've become a specialist in the dental field in root canal therapy called an endodontist. I'm doing well, making a lot of money, but I'm still miserable. I went to this place. It was kind of like some cabins for people who come to Medford on business or something. Anyway, the woman who ran um, this area was real spiritual. Okay, now I had no spirituality whatsoever. I grew up in an a-religious household. Um, the only time we went to church was when it was to make my dad look good because he was an army officer and he brought his family to church, but it was for no other reason than that. So I had no church coming. The only time I got any religion was after I got married, because my wife goaded me into becoming a Presbyterian. And I actually got baptized as a Presbyterian in my 40s. And then I found out I was Jewish because my mom was Jewish, but she never told anybody. And so, it's very interesting. And I had no religious upbringing, so I had no spirituality. And I started to get some from this lady at this place where I had left my house to stay. And at the same time, my wife was running an opera company in Medford, Oregon. She's an opera singer. Um, and one of the people that was working for her was a recovering alcoholic, and she confided in this woman, and this woman told my wife that, yeah, Mike's on a dry drunk, big time dry drunk. And she communicated that to me, and you won't believe it, but I'd never heard a term before. I had never heard what a dry drunk was, because I didn't pay any attention to alcoholism or who was an alcoholic or who wasn't. But when she told me that, something clicked. And I think it was one of many God shots that I've had throughout my life, because at that point, I stopped worrying about whether or not I was an alcoholic. Okay. I finally came to believe, yeah, maybe you have a problem. And I think I admitted at that point that I was an alcoholic. And so things started to turn around. I went to my first meeting in this little town called Rouge, Oregon, and they had their meeting in a Grange setting. It was out in the country. Mick, you would appreciate it. It was out in the country. It was away from the city. And I walked into that room, and believe this or not, there was two older guys there One guy's name was Dr. Dave, and the other guy's name was Bill. And they were of an age. And I knew something about Bill W. and Dr. Bob because I had done some reading of the big book, although I didn't believe what I was reading. But um, after being at that meeting I looked at them like they were Dr. Bob and Bill W. It was another God shot, and they took me under my wing. Um, Dr. Day became my sponsor. They made me the chair. They made me chair that meeting right away. I went into service immediately, making coffee, cleaning up. They asked me to do something. I did it because at that point, I wanted to get better. I wanted help. And I started doing the steps. I had never, all those years of being a dry drunk, I'd never done any steps. I'd never paid any attention to the steps. I started working on the steps. I did my first four step with Dr. Dave. And it was another God moment because I started getting some spirituality. I started to pray a little bit. I started to, say the third step prayer and eventually the seventh step prayer. We said the Lord's Prayer at those meetings in Oregon at the beginning of the meeting. Or maybe we said the Serenity Prayer at the beginning and the Lord's Prayer at the end. I can't remember, but um, I'd never prayed, not even foxhole praying. I had never done any praying. I didn't know what prayer was. And um, it doesn't come real naturally to me. Praying doesn't. But I do the third step in Serenity Prayer, third step and seventh step prayer and Serenity Prayer every day, religiously. And it makes a difference because I feel it. I feel I feel my higher power when I'm saying those prayers, and I pray for other people, um, which I never used to do. Meditation is still difficult for me, um, but I do the best I can. When I was growing up and alone and staying in my room a lot, music became my savior. Alcohol eventually became my savior until it wasn't, but music has always been there for me. And so even now, um, when I need to get, by myself and think about things, I'll listen to music. And it can be anything. It can be anything from opera to jazz to blues, but I'm really a rock and roller, so it's mostly that. Um, but when I started going to those meetings, I started, um, the weight started to be lifted off my shoulders, especially when I did my fifth step with Dr. Dave. I talked about all the things that I had resentments against and all the people that I had hurt. And um, when I unloaded all that on him, when I drove home from his house, it was like I was floating. People talk about being on a pink cloud. Well, I was just floating. It felt so good to be rid of all that. And I did some pretty shitty stuff when I left West Point. I did some pretty crappy stuff, and I drove drunk. Every time I drank, I drove. And I was never in a serious accident. I never got a DUI. So, because I wasn't an alcoholic, you know, only alcoholics get DUIs or have bad accidents. Well, I know there were times when I was being protected by whatever higher power is up there because I did some things that I should not have survived, and I did, and I didn't hurt anybody at the same time. So the only explanation I have for those moments, and I don't really want to tell you about them because I'm not proud of them, but you know, I I was I was with a guy who was a kleptomaniac, and I was always the driver, and he would go in and rob stores and stuff, and I would drive away, and I would drive be waiting for him to. I mean, I should have been in jail many times over, but I never got in trouble. But I was always drinking at those times, and I was always driving drunk, and it's it's just a miracle. We're all miracles, but I know for a fact that I'm a miracle because I shouldn't be here right now. I shouldn't have survived. Um, but anyway, um, my marriage improved. I still have my character defects that rear their ugly heads, um, and things don't always go smoothly. I try to use this program um, in my everyday life, like I talked about my trip to help take care of my granddaughter. I couldn't have done that without this program, and I've told um, I've told other people that one of my favorite steps is the 10 step because I've had to use it so often. You know, a lot of times the brain reacts before it responds, and in my case, I was a real good reactor. I would say things that before thinking about them. Um, this program has enabled me to recognize that sometimes quickly, sometimes not so quickly, but eventually, and then I'm able to make amends. Now, talking about making amends, most of the people that I hurt were on the East Coast. And by the time I finally got this program, it was maybe 2005 or so, when I was living in Oregon. I had to mentally make amends to them because I have no clue where they are. I wrote some letters, didn't have anywhere to send them. I made amends to my family. My family were like gobsmacked that uh, I would admit to them that I was an alcoholic because my parents were an alcoholic. I have three sisters and a brother. They were an alcoholic. Um, they said, "Why were you an alcoholic?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. Maybe it was because I have Irish blood. Maybe it's because I have Middle Eastern, or not Middle Eastern, but uh, Eastern European, Eastern European heritage. I don't know. Maybe somebody way back, and it really doesn't matter, does it? All that matters is that I admitted to myself and to this program that I was an alcoholic, and that's all that matters. And as we know, the only requirement for membership in this organization is a desire to stop drinking. Well, for me, I stopped drinking, but this program is so much more than stopping drinking. This program will save your life if you accept it. If you do the steps, not as suggestions, but as requirements. For me, they are requirements. They're not suggestions anymore. I saw that how it works. I saw that here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. When I first saw that, I went, "Oh, it's just suggestions. I don't have to really do this." Um, and it took me a long, long time to realize that, yeah, yeah, you got to work them. Um, I think I've talked about I had when Mossy first asked me to do this talk. I wrote all this long speech, and then since then I've seen so many of you guys do your talks, off the cuff and without notes and stuff, and I was so impressed. I thought I'd try to do that as well. I hope I had a whole list on how the 12 steps have impacted me. Um, I talked to, the 11th, I talked about not growing up with religion and no family spirituality. Um, and I think I've covered most of that. Uh, I'm kind of, let's see. Let me look at my notes real quick, see if there's anything else I want to tell you about my life. Um, I think I've kind of covered everything of importance as far as I'm concerned, as far as my life was concerned. Um, I will reiterate that I don't think I would have survived, um, for one, if I hadn't stopped drinking, even though I was in a dry drunk for so long. The one good thing was I wasn't drinking anymore, and because I was in the Air Force for quite a while, I couldn't do drugs either, because we were drug tested, on a random basis, and I was too afraid of losing things. I didn't want to lose things, and so I would not do mind altering substances, but for all the wrong reasons, to not lose anything, not to not to better myself, so to speak. I was functional. Even when I was drinking heavily on the weekends, I was functional. I was always able um, to show up when I needed to and work or go to school. And so um, the thing that really saved me was admitting I was an alcoholic and that my life was unmanageable. Once I did that, things really turned around for me, and it's a work in progress. I've been 35 years now, um, dry and sober. I call, those first 15 years dry. I call the next 20 years sober because I bought this program after about 15 years, and when I did, I started getting sober, but it's a daily thing for me. I have to remember the principles of this program every day. I can't let it go. I didn't go to a meeting last week because I was down in Portland um, helping babysit my granddaughter, and I felt it, you know. I missed it. I miss talking to you guys. I miss seeing the people that I learned so much from everybody that I hear in Alcoholics Anonymous. Even after all this time, there's always something to learn. And, most of the times I'll write them down when I hear them because they're important and they have meaning to my life and they help me. And if it wasn't for you guys and if it wasn't for this program, I'd be out in the wind. Yeah, I guarantee it. If I was alive, I'd be out in the wind. I'd have the same anger, fear, resentment issues that I had before this program. So, um, thank you all for being here. Thanks for letting me share. I hope I didn't bore you too bad. Um, and the last thing is I'm very grateful to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks very much. I identified with some of your story. I was never a joiner of groups, and my brothers were. They joined the Army cadet, SC cadets when they were old enough. They joined the Army cadets, and then they went in the army. But me, I couldn't take orders. People would tell me do things, and I wouldn't have it. But I identified with the straight away when you said you took a drink and it changed you because that's what happened to me. It made me feel whole because since I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous and gone back in my life, I can see that I had this ease as a child. As far back as I can remember, never felt comfortable blaming people for everything. And I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and it's the only thing I've joined and never left because I still went to meetings, even though I was drinking. I still went to meetings, and but I wasn't listening. It's only once, I was listening and that, and started practicing this program that my life changed. We were talking just before the meeting, and I said to him, "What Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a beautiful life." And that's it today. I have a beautiful life through this fellowship. I've grandchildren I love and they love me, you know, and my life today is good. Not always perfect, but I've never been a perfect person, and I will die not a perfect person. But I try to practice this program the best I can. Right, you don't want to hear no more from me because I'll start coughing in a minute. We have come to the end of the meeting, and Jim H is going to read the promises.
Hi, my name is Jim Hoover. I'm an alcoholic. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We'll comprehend the word serenity and know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and the economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. we'll suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And let's have a look. I want to thank Matthew for being host and doing all the sharing on the screen. Timekeeper Kathy, Bob S for the preamble, and of course Jim H for the promises. A reminder that our meeting is on that we have a meeting on at 7 days a week at 8:30 UK time. We also have a meeting every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. UK time. This is a meditation meeting. On Saturday we have this meeting, the old timers, and it's an extended share and it's recorded for the archives. And on Thursday evening we have a meeting on at 7:30 UK time. We use the same code for all the meetings. Stick around for fellowship after the meeting. If you want a breakout room after the meeting, please let the host know. The yellow card. Who you see here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here. Thank you everyone for staying and keeping me sober today. God bless you all. Oh, Serenity Prayer, I forgot that. Could you all join me in the Serenity Prayer using the word God as each and everyone understands it? God, grant us the serenity to accept the
Accept the
things
things
that
we
cannot
cannot
change,
change,
courage to
courage
change
to
things
change the things we
and,
can,
and the wisdom to
wisdom to
know the
know the
difference.
difference.
God bless you all.
God bless everyone.
And the
Good to see
wisdom to know
everybody.
the